Today I will talk about effect size. This is part of my series of lectures on research methodology. This is my lecture outline. First, I will give introduction of the effect size. Then I will talk about importance of effect size. Then I'll describe the types of effect size measures. Then I'll talk about limitations of effect size analysis. Then I'll describe pitfalls related to use of effect size. Then I will talk about how to avoid these pitfalls. And finally, I will state some of the good practices while reporting effect size. So the effect size is a statistical measure that quantifies the magnitude of the difference between groups or the strength of a relationship between variables. It is a vital part of research methodology because, unlike p-values, which indicate if an effect is likely due to chance, effect size reveals the practical or clinical significance of a finding. A result can be statistically significant, yet have a trivial effect size, especially with large sample sizes. Suppose that researchers are interested in determining whether there is a group difference in an outcome as a result from an intervention. Then there are three questions. Is an observed effect real or should it be attributed to chance? So answer is given by the p-value. Now these two questions, if the effect is real, how large the effect size is, and is the effect size large enough to be useful? So these are the questions pertaining to the effect size analysis. So there are three scenarios with regard to the result of a research. Research findings are significant but not clinically relevant. Research findings are clinically relevant but not significant. Research findings are both clinically relevant and significant. Research findings are neither clinically relevant nor significant. So we should actually view the result of the research with the following four scenarios. The American Psychological Association publication manual suggests that reporting effect sizes for primary findings is a must in addition to p-values. If the p-value is significant but the effect size is negligible, it may not be worth investing in the intervention or drawing conclusions for theory development. It is also important to keep sample size into account when deciding on practical or theoretical relevance of an effect size. So sample size is also important. Reporting effect sizes is also important because the values reported help other researchers in conducting power analysis to determine the appropriate sample size for their study. And reporting of effect size in addition to means and standard deviations allow other researchers to conduct meta-analysis. So these are the two useful aspects of effect size. Then little bit about publication bias. Researchers, editors, and publishers often prioritize disseminating findings from hypothesis testing studies rather than hypothesis generating studies. Also, researchers and editors often fail to publish studies with non-significant findings, even when the findings have clinical implications or importance. This becomes an issue in healthcare if clinicians only have access to published research and they are not able to consider unpublished clinically relevant findings for their practice, for policy making and decision making. Failure to publish non-significant findings or failure to include measures of clinical relevance and precision, such as effect size along with confidence intervals, may have adverse consequences ultimately affecting patient care. Now, a little bit about the research design and effect size. Effect size found in randomized controlled trials tend to be much smaller than in quasi-experimental designs. So these are some of the observations I have taken from the various articles from internet. It is up for discussion whether effect size should also be reported for differences between pre and post test results. These within group changes tend to be larger than the between group differences. I will talk about the effect size related to pre and post test study design later. Effect sizes from correlational studies tend to be larger than those from experimental studies. So these are some of the aspects related to research design. So why effect size is important? We have seen effect size complements statistical significance. Effect size is used in power analysis by future researchers, and it also facilitates meta-analysis, and effect size is independent of sample size. So how does it complement statistical significance? A low p-value only indicates that an effect is unlikely to be due to random chance, but it does not describe the effect's magnitude. So reporting an effect size provides crucial context about the practical importance of the findings. Before a study begins, researchers use an estimated effect size to conduct a power analysis, and this effect size is obtained from previous studies. So this helps determine the minimum sample size needed to detect an effect of a certain magnitude, preventing the waste of resources on an underpowered study. Then effect size are standardized measures that allows researchers to quantitatively compare results across different studies, even if they use different scales. This is a fundamental component of meta-analysis, which combines findings from multiple studies to identify the overall average effect. So actually the effect size, the measure, should be independent of the scale used in measurement. Unlike a p-value, which are heavily influenced by sample size, effect size is not. This makes it more reliable indicator of the magnitude of an effect. So let us see the types of effect size measures. So this is the classification of effect size, which I will describe one by one. So first, correlation family. The effect size are meant for measuring the association, and these include Pearson's R, coefficient of determination or R squared, eta squared, omega squared. So Pearson's R measures the strength and direction of a linear relationship between two continuous variables. Its value range from -1 to 1, and value closer to -1 or 1 indicates a stronger relationship. This is the formula. Coefficient of determination is also known as R squared. It is calculated as square of the Pearson's correlation coefficient R. It ranges from 0 to 1. It indicates the proportion of variance in the dependent variable that is predictable from the independent variable or variables in a regression model. A higher R square value signifies that the model accounts for more of the variability in the data, suggesting a better fit of the model to the data. Then eta squared, it estimates the proportion of variance in dependent variable that is explained by a predictor variable. It is often used in case of ANOVA analysis. So this is a formula. Eta squared describes the ratio of variance explained in the dependent variable by a predictor while controlling for other predictors, so making it analogous to the R square. This estimate shares the weakness of R square that each additional variable will automatically increase the value of eta squared. Then omega squared, it is a less biased alternative to eta squared that estimate the population effect size. So this is the formula for omega squared. Then Cohen's F square method. Cohen's F square method is used with methods like ANOVA or multiple regression. So these are various alternative forms of the formula of Cohen's F square. Then Cohen's Q. This measures the difference between two Fisher's transform Pearson's regression coefficients. So this is the formula. Then the second is the difference family of effect size measures. First one is Cohen's d. So this is actually the formula for Cohen's d, where in denominator we do not take into account the sample size. Whereas this is the alternate formula where we account for sample size. So Cohen's d measures the standardized difference between two means. It is calculated by taking the difference between two group means and dividing it by pooled standard deviation. These are the classic conventions which may not be applicable to a particular study. So these are the classic Cohen's conventions. So small effect size according to Cohen's is from 0.2 to 0.5, and medium effect size is from 0.5 to 0.8, and large effect size is more than or equal to 0.8. A variation of Cohen's d that is weighted by the relative size of each sample. So this is how it is weighted, which make it more accurate for studies with different sample sizes. So this is known as Hedges G. Now the effect size measures which are obtained from epidemiological studies. First one is odds ratio. It is used for comparing the odds of a binary outcome between two groups, and odds ratio of 1 indicates no difference between the groups. Relative risk compares the probability of an outcome occurring in one group versus another. It is common in medical and epidemiological research. Then measures which are obtained from chi-square analysis. So one is phi. It can be used for 2 by 2 contingency table, and this is the formula. Then Cramer's V or Cramer's phi. It can be used for any size of contingency table, and we here take into account the number of rows and columns. So this is K, and the result is interpreted as Pearson's R. And Cohen's omega. This is also from the chi-square table, and this is the formula. Then the certain measures which are more unbiased than the previous one. So first one is glass delta. So here we use the standard deviation of the control group as the standardizer in denominator. So this is the difference between Cohen's d and glass delta. It is used when comparing multiple experimental groups to a single control group. Using a control group standard deviation prevents effect size estimates from changing based on the variance of the experimental groups. It is also suitable when variance are unequal across groups. So Glass argued that if several treatments were compared to a control group, it would be better to use just the standard deviation computed from the control group, so that effect size would not differ under equal means and different variances. In the case where the standard deviations of the two groups are not significantly different, Cohen's d and Hedges g are more appropriate measures of effect size. This is because Cohen's d and Hedges g are more sensitive to small differences in means and Glass delta. Then epsilon squared, an effect size for ANOVA that is less biased estimate of the population effect size than eta squared. It is similar to omega squared but is even less commonly used. It ranges from 0 to 1, providing a more accurate estimate of the variance explained in the population than the standard eta square, especially for ANOVA results. So this is the formula here for intuitive interpretation. First one is common language effect size, also known as probability of superiority. The CLES is a measure for two groups comparison that describe the probability that a randomly selected person from one group will have a higher score than a randomly selected person from the other group. So it ranges from 0 to 1. Presenting results in a way that is highly understandable to a non-statistical audience by translating the effect into non-technical language. So this is the formula here, where this is the cumulative probability density function for standard normal distribution. So first we calculate Z, then we calculate the common language effect size. So interpretation, state the results in easily understandable form. For instance, a CLES of 0.8 can be reported as: in 80 out of 100 random pairs, a person from the treatment group showed a better outcome than a person from the control group. Variance of odds ratio and relative risk. So while the standard odds ratio and relative risks are common, variations are used for specific circumstances. For example, Yule's skew. This is the formula for Yule's skew, and it transforms the odds ratio into a range from -1 to 1, and which is more intuitive. So the range of these variations actually depend on the variant used. The example is Yule's skew, which is from -1 to 1. Improving the interpretability of results from 2 by 2 contingency tables or logistic regression, particularly when comparing two binary variables. Then the effect size measures used in case of non-parametric data. First one is Cliff's delta, a non-parametric measure for two group comparisons when data are ordinal or do not meet the assumptions of parametric test. It does not require any assumption about the shape or spread of two distributions. It represents the probability that a randomly selected value from one group will be greater than a randomly selected value from the other group minus the reverse probability. So this is the formula for the Cliff's delta, and this is the explanation. Actually, these brackets have a special meaning here. So this is how we calculate the Cliff's delta. It ranges from -1 to 1. An example is that if Cliff's delta is 0.40 with this much confidence interval, it indicates that there is a 40% non-overlap or 60% overlap between the distributions of the two groups. A positive sign indicates the second group scores were generally larger, and a negative sign indicates that the scores of the first group are larger. Then Vargas and Delaney's A. It is another non-parametric effect size, and it is interpreted as the probability that a random observation from the first group is larger than a random observation from the second group. It ranges from 0 to 1, and this is the formula. So for example, if the value of A is 0.75, it could be interpreted as there is a 75% probability that a randomly chosen participant from group A will have a higher score than a randomly chosen participant from group B. Then rank epsilon squared. It is also a measure for non-parametric data, where we do a rank-based analysis of variance, such as Kruskal-Wallis test. It indicates the proportion of variance in the rank of the independent variable accounted for by the independent variable. It ranges from 0 to 1. And this is the formula for the rank epsilon squared. Then in case of pre and post test design, the situation is little tough here. So this is how we calculate the Cohen's d, and this is how we calculate the Glass delta in case of pre and post test design. This is how we calculate the Hedges d, and the meta-analysis can be done in case of pre and post test design using this formula, where the WG is given by this formula. Now the limitations of effect size analysis. First one is bias and uncertainty. Sample-based effect sizes are estimates and are subject to sampling error. Small studies, for instance, may report larger or more varied effect size than larger studies due to chance. So this is also which we need to keep in mind while analyzing the results of a research study. Effect sizes are abstract statistics that must be interpreted in the context of the study. Cohen's conventions are general guidelines and may not reflect the real-world significance for a specific field. The small effect size could be clinically important depending on the context. The tendency for studies with larger or statistically significant effect sizes to be published more often can lead to an overestimation of the true population effect size in meta-analysis. So this is actually the problem in case of meta-analysis, publication bias. So pitfalls related to interpretation of effect size. These are the pitfalls. So let us see one by one each one of these. Mindless reliance on arbitrary benchmark. As I have told you before that Cohen's conventions for small, medium and large effects may not be applicable in the present context. Confusing statistical significance with practical significance. These two are different things. P-value less than 0.05 means statistical significance, where the utility of effect size, clinical utility, is the practical significance. Then treating an effect size in an absolute measure. An effect size represents the magnitude of difference between conditions. It is not the absolute effectiveness of a treatment. When overlooking the directionality, some measures like Cliff's delta provide information on the direction of the effect with a positive or negative sign, but others may not. While comparing two groups, a researcher must clarify which group's score was higher to interpret the directionality of the effect size correctly. Ignoring distributional characteristics, non-parametric effect sizes are chosen specifically because the data does not conform to normal distribution. Interpreting these effect sizes without considering the underlying distribution shapes can be misleading. So pitfalls related to reporting and communication. So these are the certain pitfalls. First one is that less common effect sizes are not universally understood. So it is a pitfall to report them without providing the full context. Then reporting in case of pre and post effect sizes without a control group, because there may be effect of time. Then standardizing when unstandardized metrics are more meaningful. For primary research reporting, unstandardized effect sizes, that is mean and standard deviation or raw mean differences, are often more accessible and meaningful to the average reader. And failing to report confidence interval, we must report confidence interval in case of effect size also. Inadequate sample size and publication bias, this I have described in my previous slides. Then how to avoid these pitfalls? Focus on raw values and context. Report the raw data, mean, standard deviation, or raw mean difference alongside the effect size so readers can make their own interpretation. Interpret the effect size within the specific context of your field and research question. Provide full transparency. Justify your choice of less common effect size and provide clear definitions, formulas, and references. Use common language, CLES. Leverage its intuitive probabilistic nature to explain the findings clearly to a broad audience. Address practical implications of effect size. Then recognize study limitations. Be cautious about studies with small samples and unusually large effects as they may be unreliable. Then general best practices. Explicitly state the effect size measures. So we should provide a clear rationale for why it is appropriate for your data and research question. Then define the metric. Provide confidence intervals. We have seen in my previous slide. Reference calculation methods. You must refer source of the calculations or formula used. Move beyond generic labels. So this I have talked about previously, that these are Cohen's conventions and may not be applicable. Contextualize the effect. Compare your effect size to results from similar studies or established benchmark within your field. Use real world metrics whenever possible. Translate the effect size back into original units of measurement. This often provides the more intuitive and practical interpretation for readers, especially for non-experts. So which effect size is applicable in our research? So let us see. This I have taken from internet. And so this is the flow chart about how to select an effect size for our publication. Interested audiences may pause the video and or understand this flow chart. So this is all for today. Thank you very much.